Good evening. I'd like to call the October Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting to order. If you would stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Sherry for roll call.
Ed Heil,
Present.
Jason Keogh,
Here.
Rick Knotts, Ashley Pasquale is excused, Robert Smith, Chuck Vaughn is excused, Scott Welty,
Here.
Mark Z,
Here.
Lauren Vetter, and Councilmember Michelle Lynn.
Here.
All right, we'll move on to item number 4 on the agenda, call to the public. This is a chance for any citizens that wish to address the board on matters within our jurisdiction. Remember, you have 3 minutes, and if you would like to discuss something that's in the agenda, we ask that you hold it until we get to that section. Seeing none, we'll move forward to section 5, August meeting minutes. Any comments or questions on the minutes? Anyone like to make a motion?
I'll motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll move on to section 6, communications, announcements, and staff report. We'll turn it over to Mr. Keene for the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to say we made it through another very successful October full of events, and really like to thank our staff for the hard work that they do put in the month of October to really recognize during our London Bridge days, including the parade. A lot of extra work goes in the month of October for all those events. So really like to put a shout out to them and thank them. They do a lot of good work for us. Starline After School program will present the performance Rainbow Fish on November 8th. Youth flag football and junior cheerleading will host the final game of the season on November 9th. The Boy Scouts will be earning some merit badges in the pool on November 3rd, including their life savings, their swimming, and a few of them for the mile swim. The pool will be closed on November 11th in observation of Veterans Day, and again on November 28th and 29th in honor of Thanksgiving. On Sunday, December 1st, we will turn the swimming pool over to the dogs, and the pooch party in the pool will be held from 10 to noon. Obviously, after that, we close the pool, so don't anybody worry. Then the pool will be closed for its annual maintenance for the next 2 weeks, and will reopen on Monday, December 16th. Overseeding is currently taking place at Rotary Park, so a reminder, if we could ask the public to please stay off the fields as much as possible, that allows the grass to really take root, and we'll plan on reopening those fields on December 6th. A few events coming up in the community center. The Havasu Stitchers Quilt Show will be November 1st and 2nd. An educational tour group expo will be November 6th. The annual Gem and Mineral Show will be November 9th and 10th. Project Presley, which is an Elvis tribute band, will be in on November 14th. The Western Welcome Boutique, November 23rd and 24th. And the Art Guild Holiday Shop, November 30th and December 1st. A couple of events around town. First Friday, November 1st on McCullough. Chillin' and Swillin', November 2nd at London Bridge Beach Park. Moving for Memory Walk, November 2nd at Rotary Park. The Desert Warrior event at Sarah Park Rodeo Grounds on November 9th. The annual Veterans Day Parade will be held on November 11th on McCullough Boulevard. The Lake Havasu Grand Prix will be held at the Works Track on the island November 16th and 17th. Rock for Rescues, November 23rd at London Bridge Beach. Our annual Turkey Trot will be November 23rd on the Island Trail. A Christmas County Craft and Gift Show will be November 23rd and 24th on at the Parcel on McCullough. And lastly, Coffee with the Mayor and City Manager will be held this Friday at 8:30 a.m. There is a change to that venue just due to some predicted cooler weather. We will have it at the Public Works facility at 900 London Bridge Road. That was scheduled to be out on the island ball fields. Again, that venue has changed to the Public Works facility, 900 London Bridge Road. With that, concludes my report. With that, I'll take any questions.
I don't see any questions there. Thank you for that report, Mike.
Thanks.
We'll move on to the public hearings portion of the meeting. First up is a discussion on the Sarah Park update from Mr. Knudsen.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. At the last agenda, it was requested for an update on the Sarah Park Master Plan. I can talk a little bit about some of the background process, budgeting, otherwise, but also encourage you to ask any questions that you might have about the project and for clarification purposes. We've talked about this quite a bit at this level in the last couple of years. And we want to do our best to be as blunt and transparent and honest and open about the process. So I can maybe start off with a little bit of background. This was a project. The Sarah Park Master Plan was the construction of some fields over at what we know as Sarah Park, and that was something that was commissioned. The design was commissioned by the city. A budget was identified, and some of the costs with that project did greatly increase. At the end, we identified a total cost of that project to be right around $22 million. So that was a very extensive and very expensive project for the city to undertake. That was a project that was never funded. It was not identified in the budget process, and it was never identified in our CIP. CIP referring to our capital improvement plan, which is a budget that we have as the city, where we have one-time expenses as part of that process. So in our CIP, might be the purchase of a fire engine, it might be the construction of what we know as Cypress Park. This year in the CIP, as it relates to this board and recreation activities, we have a project for the construction of some pickleball courts up at Dick-Samp Park. So those are examples of CIP or one-time expense projects. Then, of course, we have to go into that there's an expense to construct it in the CIP, and then we have to identify a budget in the operating budget or the general fund budget in this instance for ongoing maintenance. So to mow the lawn and water the fields and all the other things that go along with that. But this was a project that was discussed quite extensively throughout the community, but it was not a project that was identified in the budget, and I think in large part was because of the high cost of the project. If I recall correctly, and it's been a couple months since I looked at it closely, but you had upwards of $6 million, I believe, and just in grading costs for that site to make that area flat enough before you could even start to think about constructing anything at that site. Those that have been at the Sarah Park area know the topography and all that's out there. It's a beautiful area, but very, very expensive for construction to take place out in that area on a scale that we discussed. So what we have through the city right now is I talked about the CIP. Maybe talk a little bit about how that process works. So we have the city right now. We have a 5-year capital improvement plan. So we try to program for the next 5 years what some of these projects will be. We identify a budget over the course of 5 years, and then we try to squeeze in project based on the available resources that we have as a city to make these things work. It's a little bit of a puzzle as we try to kind of fit these pieces together, but we've done with the direction of council, it has directed staff to kind of piece that puzzle together, and then we take that. We have some work sessions in the spring, have conversations with the public, conversations with the various boards, and then we bring those projects to the council for approval in that CIP. Something that hadn't occurred in previous years, but has occurred in the 2 years that I've been here. With council direction, we've identified a fully funded CIP. So that means that we've moved away from a list of projects that we'd like to see someday into a plan that is fully funded, where we can assure our residents and others that are interested that these are the projects that will be done according to the plan. Now, every year we go back and update that 5-year plan. So sometimes you're going to see that puzzle unfold a little bit and then get pieced back together. So sometimes maybe a project that's identified in year 3 or 4 might be moved around as priorities do come up. But that 5-year plan is updated on an annual basis as part of the budgeting process. I guess a little bit about the city's resources. As the manager, it's my responsibility to take a proposed budget with all the hard work and effort of the department heads, based on all the conversations we have with the public and what the residents are telling us are the needs in the community. And as part of that process, this year I asked the department heads, I said, give me a list of items in the budget. We don't have resources to fund all these things, but we do have, I need to understand as a whole, the council needs to understand, I need to understand, and the department heads need to understand what are the needs of the city moving forward. Our belts are very tight at the city. We do quite a bit with limited resources that we do have. And my direction to the department heads were, give me a list of needs, not wants, but needs in terms of what we need to provide services to the greatest degree to our residents. And we came back with $17 million worth of needs in part of this budget process. We were able to address a fraction, a little over $1 million, based on some things that we had in there. But that's just kind of give you a degree of the number of requests and the things that our community wants to see. But we have parameters we have to live within, and that's the resources that our taxpayers and our residents afford the city. And as part of that, we identified police cars. For the first time in 3 years, we're purchasing police vehicles in this year's budget. For the first time in 3 or 4 years, we're purchasing hose for our fire department and turnout gear for our personnel in the fire department. So we have a lot of needs across the board. I'm not trying to minimize the needs here in Parks and Recreation and what we want to see as far as the community and ball fields and increased services with parks. But I'm just trying to paint that picture that the city's got a lot of needs, and we have parameters in terms of the resources and the funds that we have to accomplish these things. So it's not a small task. We spend many months at the staff level trying to identify and piece together this budget. It's next week it's November, and we're already going to start that budget process for the following year. So we got a break for a couple months, and now we get back into it trying to figure this out. And part of these conversations today are part of that effort. And then we go into some work sessions, I believe in April timeframe. We'll be going to the budget, going to the council and discussion with the budget on the work session, kind of how these things work out, and then in the end we create that process. So again, just trying an overview of the budget. It's not what I came here to talk about, but I think it's important context to have in relation to some big projects that maybe were once discussed but aren't budgeted within the city's existing plans right now. So, and I think the next item on your agenda is a discussion with regards to the identification of the existing needs and demands within the community. So Mike did a fantastic job, talked to all the different user groups, the Little League and soccer leagues and all the other folks in the community that provide really good service to our kids in the community. So based on that, what do we need to do to fill that gap for that demand? And not to steal his thunder, I'll touch on it just a little bit, but we've had some conversation with the school districts, and maybe there's a partnership there, and that Michael will explain that might benefit the school, the city, and in the end, the residents and the kids that want to go through and enjoy themselves with soccer and all the other things that occur out in the community. So those are my prepared remarks. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may or may not have.
So, Mr. Knudsen, thank you for walking us through the process. On behalf of the board, I always love to learn to know how the city operates. You know what leads us to making the decisions. Also, on behalf of the board, there has been a little bit of frustration and some confusion in the last, I'd say, in the last 9 months to a year. As you mentioned a couple of years ago, we were here. The board was hearing a whole lot about what was about to happen at Sarah Park, and then it just kind of turned into, well, maybe not right away, and then it just kind of vanished. So, along with that, we've heard from some of the user groups. We've talked about what probably is a more realistic approach to making sure that the infrastructure needed for our local sports groups is available. And maybe the abandoning of the Sarah Park project for now isn't as big a deal as we thought it would be when we heard how necessary it was going to be 2 years ago. So I'll hold off because I want to talk about the next item on the agenda. But anyone else on the board have questions or comments so far?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Do you guys look
Yes,
into
sir.
getting grants and things like that? Like, let's say you wanted to do a $6 million, leveling before you start your project. Are there grants that exist that would help us with stuff like that in the future?
Certainly appreciate the question, Board Member Zeef. It's what we have is we're always in constant search of grants. There's no doubt about that, whether it's for parks or other departments. And I think Mike's identified a grant application that he's going to use for maybe a possible lighting over at Cypress Park. But we're talking about, I think it's $50,000 or somewhere, $25,000 for something of that effort. Grants are available. You have to look them out. You have to seek them out. And you have to match up what the grants are with what your needs are. Typically, that doesn't always happen, but we are always in constant search for grants to help supplement. More grants we bring in, that means the less city's taxpayers and city resources that we have to utilize for improvements in the community.
Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I have one.
Yes, sir.
Just, thank you. Is it fair to assume that Sarah Park, the way we know it today, is pretty much the way it's going to be for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Board Member Heil. It's right now any construction with any type of ball fields or anything similar to what we've talked about with the Sarah Park Master Plan is not budgeted by the city, and the city has no plans to construct or develop that at this time.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
getting back to grants, does the city have a dedicated employee, a dedicated grant writer, or is each department responsible for seeking and writing their own grants?
The short answer is yes. We have a grant writer, a grant administrator, that works in our administrative services department, and she does a wonderful job of seeking grants for us. And then we also rely on each of the departments to be working with her or independently of it. So we probably have a good couple dozen folks within the city employees that are seeking out grants to one degree or another. But we do have one dedicated employee, and we have a number of folks within parks or within police, within fire that are also seeking out grant opportunities. So, yeah.
Any more questions from the board?
Well, one more question.
Yes, sir.
There's a pretty healthy maintenance budget for the parks, stuff like that, so we shouldn't be concerned, as far as mowers and equipment and things like that. It seems like they're always in beautiful shape.
No, I appreciate that, and that's one of the strategies too, and that we identified through this last budget process, and council directed staff to take a look at our existing resources to make sure that we're taking care of what we currently have. So, in terms of equipment or adding amenities to our existing parks, that's been a top priority. So, our equipment, our personnel, in terms of the maintenance of the parks, is a top priority for Mike, for the city, and for the council.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Knutson. As a reminder, this is a public hearing. If members of the public who are in attendance have questions or comments or contributions in this discussion, now would be the time to step up to the mic. Seeing none, we'll move on to 7.2 in the agenda. 7.2A is an update on the Island Ball Field. Mr. King.
And I think this this section is kind of follows along and tags along with the discussion regarding Sarah Park. Last year at the retreat with City Council and staff, the concept of throwing a certain amount of money at that field and really converting it into more of a much bigger facility for baseball and softball might be a opportunity or a time that we could do that. Really, in looking at that, what some of the proposal was really making it almost a minor league field, and that would then take away the football field completely, and we would need to find another spot for that. So in further discussions, that item really kind of fell off of the board as the list as well, because it really just didn't make sense. While we're building a great grandiose field, we're going to lose another field in that process. So again, I kind of tag along to what Jess has said. Those priorities change, and that was really just kind of a discussion that happened during the retreat and things that we looked into. And again, it just didn't make as much sense to dump that money in there. Now, we do have some improvements planned for those fields. Without tagging too much into the next agenda item, there is definitely some requests made by the users of those fields. Actually, in one of them, in the football field, they said it was in one of the best shapes they've seen it in years. So that's definitely a positive. But some things that we need to work on were definitely identified as well. The condition of the baseball field or softball field, and how dense that red material is. The ball bounces off of it very hard. It's pretty much like playing on a parking lot. So there's some items that we will address internally as well. So we will be definitely spending some resources out there to update and upkeep, again, the facilities that we do have currently. So that's really kind of my report on that. I think that one tags a little bit along with that CIP projects and the Sarah Park, where that was identified maybe as a conversation, but again, the dollars were never truly identified to be spent in the budget. And when we relooked at things and priorities, that wasn't necessarily the best use of those funds.
Okay, thanks for that update. I have a quick question. You mentioned that while we're not going to go for the minor league that would wipe out the football field, that there are some updates that will occur. Will those happen under your maintenance and operations budget? Is that something that we'll have to wait for, to budget in future years?
No, they will take place in our maintenance and operation budgets, and we won't have to necessarily wait for a CIP project to be able to make those improvements.
Okay, thanks. Any questions or comments from the board?
Sure. A while back, you were talking about improvements to the HVAC system at the Aqua Center. This is a while back. I think there's in discussions. I might not have been paying attention, but did anything get pushed to help you guys with that at the aquarium?
Yes, it is currently in our CIP plan.
Any other questions or comments from the board on the island ball fields? Okay, it's a public hearing. Anyone from the public attending that would like to question or comment on this item? All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to 7.2B, Field Users Group Meeting. Mr. Keene.
Thank you. On October 1st, we called together all the field users. So a couple of the soccer groups, a couple of the baseball groups. We invited the adult softball, co-ed softball, senior softball. I think I've touched on the majority of them that were there. Board member Keogh was in attendance that night for that event. And really, we just kind of wanted to talk with them. As the city, we've done some restructuring with our Parks and Recreation program, and the Parks Department has been transferred over, and we are one department again, whereas up until July, really Parks resided in Public Works. So now as a Parks and Recreation Department, we can really focus on some different priorities there that we have in the parks. And so we wanted to reach out to those user groups and kind of discuss that, some changes have happened in the city, and really kind of get some of their feedback and desires of, okay, what are our immediate needs? And immediate and then short term. Let's not have the big dream at this meeting of, what is 20 years down the road of this grandiose plan? What can we do now? And really, some of those things that came out, again, were, some really minor things that we can really address and address quickly. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to talk with one of our parks maintenance guys today regarding some of these, because I do know a couple of them have already been addressed and taken care of. Simple things is addressing some of the pitching mounds that are out on the fields and rebuilding those. Bullpens on the sides of the baseball fields at Sarah and Dixant Park, including in our 3 baseball or softball diamonds at Rotary. There's enough room on the side of them to incorporate a T-ball field in there as well. That would just simply be, mowing the grass down lower to get some of the lines in, and that allows them to practice all at one time, instead of then having to take up a big field for the T-ball side of softball. They can practice on this other field while their big sisters are, practicing on the big fields. So again, some real simple things. The Island Ball Field, the hard pack, the possibility of overseeding out at Sarah. Lights came up for sure at not only at Cypress, where we know we do have a spot that's not quite as bright as we would like it, but up at the upper fields, so the little T-ball fields at Sarah Park. Again, when kids get out of school here in the winter, it's pretty much dark already, so that really limits their practice time to a very brief time or on the weekends. So what would it take to add, some lighting? And it doesn't need to be, the big sport lighting that we put up at Cypress. Could it simply be some lights, even from Unisource on a side of a pole that might be able to light up those fields enough for them to play on. We did have some discussion regarding some additional field space. Oro Grande came up as one of the fields that might be able to be repaired fairly easily, rapidly. I know Starline was also brought up. And so, as Jess said earlier, we did have a meeting last week that was planned beforehand with the school district, just their kind of quarterly meeting. But one of the topics that we did discuss is, would the school district at least be open to the idea of entertaining a conversation of what could that look like, what would that look like, to be able to partner with them. And again, as we talked about a few months ago in partnering with them in ways for our after school program and our summer camps, it in all reality ends up saving the taxpayers a lot of money because we're sharing resources. So they were definitely interested in at least entertaining the conversation. So I look forward to, in the next couple months, being able to grab some momentum and further those conversations and kind of see what we can come up with, what type of plan might be available out there, and really that would satisfy, I think, a lot of the immediate need and the short-term need there for our field users, as well as being able to rotate some of those fields. As we all know, everybody wants to play on Cypress because it's new. Well, if you've been up to Cypress lately too, it's not as green as we'd want it. There's definitely some spots where, especially in front of the goal nets where the goalies stand, there's not much grass there at all. But being able to rotate around the fields that everybody utilizes to give some of the fields some rest, some time that we can do some maintenance on them, would definitely help. So those conversations, I was very pleased to hear that they're open to the idea, and so we'll take advantage of that and have some further conversations with them. So that kind of finishes my report of that meeting. Again, I think it was very well attended from the user groups, as well as something that we want to continue in the future. It wasn't a one-time shot. I'd like to do them either every 6 months, every year. Again, they're the ones out there utilizing the fields. We can maintain them to what we think is what they need, but it's really them letting us know, hey, by third base, there's this thing that makes no sense. Can you fix it for us? And what I also really did like is there was some conversation between the groups themselves of how they could help each other. And it just was I don't know, kind of a community thing there with the user groups themselves, and something that hopefully can grow and continue, that they can help each other as well, scheduling wise and or just with resources. At the very end, I did have a gentleman come to me, and he said their group has some funds available to possibly purchase some scoreboards, but they don't know how to install them, or they can't pay, and they don't have necessarily the money to install them. Come talk to me. That's an easy, we have a lot of talent in the city, and we can definitely work that deal out where, maybe some of the ball fields at Sarah Park end up with brand new scoreboards out of just that simple conversation. So definitely something I look forward to fostering in the future.
Thank you for that report, Mr. Keene. So so now that we have all three of these, we talked about Sarah Park and the Island Ball Fields and this user group meeting. I think that'll help open up the conversation for what really the opportunities we're trying to address here. Pardon me. I was grateful to be a part of that meeting, that user group meeting, and in all honesty, when I walked in and realized that Mike had set me at the head of the table, I was a little concerned, and I kind of expected a little bit of contention. That these user groups were going to have, a laundry list of things that they needed done right away, and it was quite the contrary. A bunch of realistic folks understanding that resources are restricted, and they're all shared. It was refreshing to hear that some of the complaints they had, and they were all safety. There were the football field and one of the softball fields that had a divot, and someone tripped and busted their nose open. Those were valid concerns, and I think they're easily addressed. I was also really pleased to hear one of the soccer groups that has a tournament coming up is already planning to use the fields, the school district fields. And that was something that I hadn't considered, something that this board has discussed as something that we need to work toward. I think we still need to. I mean, I know that there are resources on the school district fields that could be updated, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about the city's collaboration with the school district. And I'm hoping that those user group meetings continue regularly, and that eventually it's the school district folks are involved there too. And so that's it for my comments. I'll open it up to the board for questions or comments.
I'd just like to say thank you for getting all that done, and thank you and talking to everybody. It really makes me feel happy to live in this town, to know that everybody really works together for a greater purpose. There's not a lot of, I'm probably the most contentious one. But it really is awesome to see you guys making progress on that and sharing with the school district. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Back to you, Mr. Keene. Oh, okay. It's a public hearing. Anyone here that'd like to address the board about this topic, any of the last three discussion items we had, please feel free to make your way to the mic. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to, section 8 of the agenda, future discussion items. So I have one I'd like to hear about, at least one. the status on the pickleball courts. The last time we met, I believe they were getting ready to go into design a meeting, so I'd like to know where we are there.
I'll second that.
And as we get really going in that after the design phase and we start the construction, that'll be on the list for every meeting that we have.
I have one more. Teen break. It's going to get time to start planning that stuff out, so I'd like to hear about where we are. It doesn't have to be next month, but when we can get it fit in the next meeting or two.
I'll second that.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is future meetings. Sherry?
Our future meetings are November 25th and December 23rd.
All right. So November 25th, same time, same place.
Correct.
And with that, we're at item 10. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll move that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
And we are adjourned. Thank you.